Hello friends, and does the time fly? Patch 8.16 has already arrived. The main point of this patch is surely the new Nexus Blitz game mode. But we'll talk about it in a separate video later. Today we are going to cover the balance changes. In this update, Riot Games made another hit on the most popular champions of the current meta, have made some serious adjustments to the damage runes, and are also sending some reinforcements for the tanky champions. So we'll start from the top. Let's start with the targeted nerfs and buffs. Aatrox is receiving another portion of nerfs coming his way. Riot Games are swearing that Aatrox is absolutely stable at the moment, but that's rather wrong. In higher ratings, Aatrox has nearly disappeared from the top lane and has shifted over to the mid lane. He feels a lot better when he is playing on a shorter lane, plus he's got an option to farm the nearby neutrals. A decrease to his healing when fighting monsters and an increase to his ultimate cooldown will not really tip the scale of his balance. He'll still have his high damage output, his crowd control and a built-in Guardian Angel, but overall his popularity in solo queue matches will drop. Fizz is doing great at the moment. The last few buffs have brought him to the very top 10 of the strongest mid lanes of the current meta. And after his ability power scaling might be unpleasant, but it won't really affect his early laning phase. What will hit him are the changes to the domination runes, which we'll cover a bit later. From now on, Fizz will have to be more aggressive, which is not something every player likes to do. Not every matchup will allow them to do. This is why you can expect his win rates to drop in the first few days after the patch. Hecarim is getting a slight buff to his rampage damage output, but we also know that a very important rune for him, that being Celerity, is receiving a slight nerf this patch. And that's why this change will not really benefit Hecarim at all. His main issue will still be a very high cooldown on his ultimate, which prevents him from snowballing during the early and mid game. Quinn is receiving a second nerf in a row. As we've noted in our analysis for patch 8.15, Quinn still remains quite strong, but her win rate went down. She went from the very top down to number 6. The nerf brought in this patch is more of a psychological one rather than an actual gameplay one. Quinn is only going to lose a half of the damage point growth with each level, which is 11 damage points by level 18. It's not all that scary, is it? Quinn is still a very strong top laner, and you can still abuse that to grow in rank. She's also going to be hit by the nerf of the domination runes, but not really as hard as Fizz. Quinn is a ranged champion, so it's easier for her to utilize the low cooldown of the Electrocute and Scorch runes. Rakan is getting a very huge nerf. A loss of 30 points of health and 3 points of armor equals to 170 gold lost from the very start of the match. That's a lot. Seeing the buffs to Nautilus and Leona, both of whom can pretty much replace him in his role of initiation-based supports, it all starts to look like Rakan is about to fall out of the meta. Taliyah is also receiving another portion of nerfs, with the most important one being the increase of her Seismic Shove cooldown. This nerf is basically aimed at the professional scene, and won't really affect the solo queue Taliyah at all. She still remains a very strong mage jungler with a lot of snowballing potential and strong ganks. Trundle is finally getting a nerf. This half-tank, half-fighter was really strong during the early levels. Minus 40 points of damage on the last level of his bite is a huge hit to Trundle's early game performance. So solo queue Trundles will start buying time at again, as the increased scalings on it will make this nerf hurt less. But when it comes to the professional scene, Trundle's popularity will receive a significant drop. Wukong really was the bane of all top laners in patch 8.15. He was at the top of the win rate table of the Korean server. Not too many of the top lane champions could survive his early trades. On the one hand, he had this nerf coming, but on the other, such an aggressive playstyle is supposed to be punished by the jungler. However, we should know that this champion is rather difficult to balance. He's one of the old school champions and really needs a full gameplay rework. He can either be too strong and will snowball out of control, or can be too weak and can't even score a single kill. Zoe is the champion that many people think should not exist. She received a lot of nerfs in the last few patches, and this nerf is supposed to be the final one. Her win rate has already dropped below 49% and will drop even lower. However, her random power spikes when she gets a Proto Belt active spell out of the minions will still be there, which means that Zoe will still be played regardless of all the nerfs. Okay, let's get to the more significant changes, the buffs to tanks. Note that only the less popular tanks are getting the actual buffs. We're sorry Mundo, no buffs for you today. Tanks aren't doing all that well nowadays, all of them except for Mundo. They aren't really that needed in the current meta of AoE mages and fighters. The matches are too short and hectic for tanks to actually come useful. The real buffs are aimed at Amumu and Rammus, who will now appear in the lower rating solo queue matches a lot more often. A decrease to the Eclipse cooldown is a pleasant but slightly useless buff to this champion's early game. During the early game, she is far more likely to use her Eclipse in a combination with the Zenith Blade, and this nerf makes the cooldown of the Blade a lot longer than the cooldown of the Eclipse. However, she will become much stronger during the mid-game. The changes to Nautilus are somewhat weird. On the one hand, he's receiving a buff to his shield, both in the quality and the quantity of its costs, but on the other hand, he gets the scales nerfed. This is more of a buff to his supportive side, where he'll probably replace Rakan in his current role. Nautilus has really been kind of forgotten lately, but he still remains a very strong support, and he's extremely useful when it comes to battling the fighters. Tahm Kench has basically conquered the professional scene in the last couple of weeks, so now he's receiving a significant nerf to his Devour spell. It was too easy for him to counter the enemy initiations with it. This is why he's getting the duration of it decreased, and the cooldown of it increased by 2 seconds. Just like before, this nerf is aimed at the professionals and will not really affect the solo queue players. Professional players can make good use of that increased cooldown on it, but the solo queue players are far less likely to care about it too much. Okay, now let's move to the changes made to the runes. In this patch, Riot Games have targeted the damage dealing runes and their balance. From their standpoint, this will help to make the matches a bit less quick and hectic, by decreasing the burst damage capabilities. Not only the Electrocute and Scorch runes are getting enough to their damage output, they are getting their cooldowns decreased as well. Electrocute is basically turning into the old Thunderlord rune, which was used for poking and trading instead of increasing the actual burst damage. All of these changes will primarily hit the assassins like Fizz, Talon, Queen, Zed, Akali and some other champions as well, and will really help some battle mages like Victor, Ahri, Corki and some others. Generally speaking, the mid lane poke meta is about to get that much more viable, which means that we'll see more people using the Inspiration rune path, with Biscuit Delivery and Time Warp Tonic becoming their favorite runes. Also, this change might hit the aggressive junglers, which use Domination as their primary. The final part of this patch is the reversal of the nerf to the Heal Summoner spell. This is a good thing, which will help to drive the teleport spell users out of the mid and bot lanes away from the lane much more effectively. Well, and that's it for now. This is how the patch 8.16 looks like. Not too many global changes in fact, just some targeted nerfs and buffs. So guys, watch the current meta and stay informed about the changes. As always, thank you so much for watching this video and good luck in your solo queue.